Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today, you're in for a treat. We've got Andrew Scheps. Andrew's a multi-Grammy Award winner 3 times. He's worked with artists like Green Day, Red Hot Chili Pepper, Weezer's Audioslave, Black Sabbath, Metallica, Linkin Park. U2 goes on and on. Johnny Cash, Neil Diamond, Iggy Pop, and tons of names I'm not mentioning in that list that are like just legendary names. After 25 years, he relocated to the UK, where he is now stationed, and we are talking to him via time zone shift. So thanks for accommodating. And there's
absolutely. No, it's worked out perfectly.
So welcome to the show. We really appreciate you. We're really kind of intrigued about, people in their process, and people that have been able to achieve a certain level of success, and then legendary success. We're interested in what they think about that after they look back on it. You've been doing this 30 years, I'd have to guess. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I got out of college in 88 and worked for a manufacturer for about 2.5, 3 years. And then since then I've been freelance, just trying to make records. So yeah.
And I see that on your discography that you toured and did, I don't know if you did front of house, but you did live mixing for Michael Jackson.
I did. Sub mixing. I was in the monitor tent getting 45, 50 inputs or something like that, and mixing all that down to basically, it was like early stems. I was giving out 8 stereo stems to front of house and to monitors.
Wow. And Stevie Wonder, yes?
And Stevie Wonder, yeah, just as a keyboard tech.
Oh, wow.
Was pretty amazing. Not for Stevie himself. There was another guy taking care of him, but I took care of the guys in the band.
Well, you're one of these dudes that's on the landscape, and correct me if I'm wrong. My perception is that you're incredibly analog. Like, you love analog, and it's a very much a part of your process. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, certainly not for mixing at all. I'm 100% in the box and have been for probably more than 10 years. But I've owned a huge Neve until recently, and I love some of the old analog gear. And for recording, obviously, it is analog in the air. So the microphone is, and the longer you keep it analog and go through some of the stuff that's been made, the better your recording will probably be. But once it's digital, I don't see any reason to ever make it analog again until you listen to it.
That kind of blows me away. I know you had an 8068 Mark II, correct?
Yeah.
Which was, widely regarded as maybe the height of the Neve consoles, right? They got it the most right there.
I think some people would argue that some of the earlier ones, like the 8038, might be sonically a little better because there's a little less in them. But in terms of usefulness, absolutely. It had 8 sends, with 2 of them being stereo, 16 bus. It was an inline console, so you had a lot of inputs. And mine was a double, so it was a 64-channel board. So with a couple of mods, you could have had 128 channels getting into the mix bus. But mine wasn't modded. But you could have had 64 mics and 64 tape returns all going at the same time.
Now, we were just talking to Ollie Stroud yesterday at Mission Sound in Brooklyn, and he has a 8032 that has old 1073s, the metal knob ones. And I was wondering, correct me, is the 8068 a Class A or is it Class AB?
Yeah, the EQs are identical. The mic pre-EQ thing, it's a 31102, but that is a 1084 without the extra line input. Thus, the whole thing about not being able to get 128 line inputs unless you mod it. So, it's the same mic pre, and it's exactly the same as the 1084. So you get the high pass and the low pass, and you've got more frequencies in the mid range than the.
So that will be a Class A mic pre then, yes?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean,
I know that when they went to the 5-band and like the 1095s and 1081s, then that bottom one was like an IC circuit, the bass, I believe.
Well, but the other thing is that not in the EQs, but in the amplifiers, in the aux modules, there were 2 different versions of the amplifier, because there was a fully discrete Class A. And then when the BBC was buying the boards, they said, this thing is way too unstable and every channel sounds way too different. So we need a chip version. And so, of course, everybody hates the chip version because it's a chip.
Right.
It might actually sound a little better, and it's way more consistent, and nothing ever goes wrong with it. There's no temperature drift, nothing.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
And
so
when you
my
say,
console was actually about half and half with those.
okay, that's cool. You had both, and so you'd be a good person to have an opinion about which ones you preferred. The 64, that's a crazy size Neve. Almost when you hear about that, you hear stories about them putting Neves together to get that size.
Well, it was too. It was too, but the second half of it was made by Neve as an expander, but for a different console.
I see.
So it had the bucket for the monitor section, but it didn't have any of the actual monitor section stuff in it.
Gotcha. And I see behind you there, it looks like you have is that a new Neve that I'm looking at?
No, that's
a
modular.
synth.
Yeah, it's all I got left, actually.
That's wild, dude. I thought it was a console.
I still have a BCM 10, which is awesome. So 1073s in that, but that's out. A friend of mine's got a studio and he does tracking regularly. So he's renting that from me.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was mistaken. I thought it was a synth when you moved out of the way, like an old Oberheim.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. That is.
Okay.
That's all modular synth. Yeah.
Incredible. But you said you have a BCM 10 hanging out?
Yeah, I do have a BCM 10, but that's not here. That's at a
gotcha.
friend's studio. Yeah.
Dude, that's wild.
Are you a keyboard player as well?
No, I'm not an anything player. I played brass instruments through school and was mediocre at best, especially once I got to college. I mean, I was not good. And I play a lot of instruments on my own with Pro Tools, but I don't play with people.
Okay. Got it.
You know what's funny, Mike? Corroborate this. I've been on. We sort of got right on and jumped right into this interview. We've been hanging out for maybe 8 minutes, and I already can tell that you're like totally easygoing, zero attitude, and you can make a record like right now with this dude.
Well, I don't know about that, but
what, you're a prima donna?
No, definitely not a prima donna. No, not at all. I mean, I think the opposite. I think my imposter syndrome would keep me from ever being a prima donna about anything.
That's crazy that you would still feel like you have an imposter syndrome at this part of your career after all the, proof, all the evidence.
Well, I got to say that, I mean, I have it really badly. I panic before every single mix that I send out. But I've been doing, since the pandemic started, I've been doing these interviews on Mondays, and they've been really cool and very, very long form, like 5-hour interviews and things like that.
Wow.
But what's been really enlightening about it was how many people who make records have imposter syndrome. There are a few people who don't, and they're like, well, what's that? Like, the concept doesn't even make sense to them. But most of the people I've talked to feel exactly the same way. And I think part of it is the root of it may be that you're working on someone else's art. So while there's no right answer, and we all know that there's no perfect way to do anything on a record, the artist is doing exactly what they want, whereas you're helping them do that thing. So
Right.
You're always at the mercy of your interpretation of what you think they want. And so I think that's what feeds it. But yeah, mine's pretty horrific.
Well, and it also keeps you in a place of wanting to serve. It's like, well, at the end of the day, it's like, you have to tour with this. You have to live with this record for your lifetime. I want you to be happy with it. How do I make you happy? Early on, I think maybe in my career even too, it's like, I almost felt like, well, this is my art. And slowly you start to realize wait, no, I'm here to help them. I'm here to fit into their art and their process and serve it.
Yeah, until your name's on the front of the record, it's not your record.
Yeah.
Service business,
Yeah.
What it is.
It is, but people, like for you, it's like when you finish a mix with this imposter syndrome, do you feel do you have mixes that you're like, oh my God, I'd want that played to represent me after I pass. This is I've really nailed it. Do you ever feel that?
No, there are a few mixes just as mixes that I think, oh wow, that actually sounds good. Like I'm proud of some of the stuff I've done. But I think that because it's other people's stuff that I never I can't take credit for it. I managed to make it sound good, maybe. But the whole point is that I've managed to make something that was great feel great to other people.
Right.
Through the mix. I'm supporting what was already there. So there are a few records, there's an artist, Low Roar, who's on my label, and I've been doing records with Ryan now for years and years, and we're actually right in the middle of his 5th full-length record. Those records I'm actually really invested. That's as close to being an artist as I'll ever get. I sometimes will completely change things and almost forget to mix it. and send it back to him. And most of the time he's really into it. So we've got this great collaboration creatively. So those I can really sort of take ownership in a way that a record I've mixed, I mean, I don't own that. I can be proud of it and I can be excited about it, but it's not my thing.
Yeah, I would think that it's going to be a surprise to a lot of our listeners that at this stage in your career, you still do have insecurities.
Oh, God, yeah.
They imagine you, like they imagine them as you. Like when they think of Andrew Scheps, they think like, oh, this is what his life must be like. This is what his day-to-day, his level of respect.
It's all unicorns and fairies, you know.
But I think that's a really valuable lesson. If I were watching this at 19, I'd think to myself, okay, I just got to keep doing push-ups. I got to keep trying to be great every day. And just because I was great yesterday doesn't mean I'm great today.
Yeah. You've never made it. You know, that's not a thing that can happen.
Yeah. So you don't have a console currently other than the BCM10, or do you have a...
No. I mean, I've got the BCM10, like I say, which isn't here. No, but my mixing rig is an iMac and headphones and a pair of speakers.
Wow.
That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an S1. I've got some faders for when I'm building up a balance or mixing a live thing or whatever. But those aren't on most of the time anyway.
What led up to the sale of your 64 input 8068 Mark II?
Well, what led up to the sale? So when I moved to the UK, I'd already not been mixing on it for a couple of years. So it was in the way and it was starting to decay because if you don't use them, you know, they really do start to fall apart. Just the switches get dirty. And so when I was going to be moving, I looked to partner with a studio, find a room where they had a room and some business, but wanted to upgrade their gear. Could not find anything in the States. And there was a studio here in the UK called Mono Valley, MONNOW, named after the river, not after one speaker. And a really great studio that's kind of the sister studio to Rockfield, which everybody has heard of. But it's right around the corner. It used to be owned by the same family, and then they split up years ago. So great studio that I'd made a few records in, and it was perfect timing. They had an SSL in there that was starting to die, like plasma meters, and when those break, you can't fix them. And there was stuff just like, it was either going to take a big investment to recap it and fix it, or perfect timing. So all of my gear went into Mono Valley about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. And it was fantastic. It was as if that control room was built for that desk. Like everything fit perfectly. It sounded amazing, really incredible. But then a combination of just business stuff and the pandemic, et cetera, that studio closed in May of last year. Mm-hmm. So I tried to find another place to put the gear. The people who were running the studio, we tried to find another place maybe to set up a new studio, and just couldn't find anything that made sense financially. And so then I had to decide, like, was I going to put it into storage and watch it disintegrate and probably never be used again, just sit in storage and then get sold for parts? Or was I going to try and sell it and put it up for sale thinking it would take forever? And someone showed up and wanted everything. They bought absolutely everything, because it wasn't just the console. It was an entire studio's worth of everything: microphones, outboard gear, instruments, headphone systems, boom stands, the whole deal. And now it's sold. So, yeah.
And tell me what that day was like. Was it like a little bit of selling a sailboat where it's like, thank God I'm rid of it? Or was it like heartbreaking to like give away?
Oh, both. I mean, my wife and I both love the console and everything about it. I mean, it smells good. It's old. It's warm. There's wood on it. Like, I mean, it's like one of the coolest pieces of furniture ever built that also happens to sound great. So there was a lot of like, I can't quite believe that I sold it. But then at the same time, it was a relief, because what was I going to do with it? I mean, it was almost like I'd have to find a spot in the house to set it up and power it up and just let it sit, and then go down like once a week and hit all the switches. It was ridiculous. There was no good option.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice that it stays together. We actually thanked Ollie for keeping the 8032 together rather than doing that thing. He's got 6 2254s in it.
Right.
That it came with, and he's got it's like you could part that thing out and it'd be all over America. And there's something about keeping it together. It's almost like you done a solid in the music business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd spent a lot of time integrating the two consoles. Like one of them, for a while, Shep was making reissue Neves, and they had different knobs, the metallic knobs in the middle.
Yeah.
And I spent thousands of dollars getting old knobs to put on, and everything about it was just great. So yeah, the idea of then pulling all that stuff out and putting it into racks, and basically the frame would have gone into the tip.
And then it's gone. It's disappeared. You've erased it.
Yeah. So I'm really glad
history.
that it still exists as a thing.
What did you think of those Sheps? So it was who was it? What was his name? He used to work at Neve, and he was licensed. I have a Sheps. What was their?
Well, there were a few people. I mean, Jeff
compressor.
Tanner did some stuff, but his wasn't the Shep stuff, I don't think.
No, those guys were. Those guys are at odds, I think. When you read,
and Brent Averill also did modules. Like there are a bunch of different people who've done Neve.
But Tanner and Shep both worked at Neve.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you know more than me. Yeah, I don't.
And
really
I think
know.
that Shep actually was the only one to be licensed to actually do Neve recreations. So I had the compressor. It was great. I still have it. I'm wondering what you thought of those modules compared to the ones that were in your desk.
I never used them.
Never used them. Okay,
No,
I thought you said you had
just
bought some and replaced.
Well, no, it had the knobs from them, but it was actual Neve modules in there. They just had the knobs for some reason. I mean, because those knobs are actually a lot more robust than the sort of Bakelite-y plastic stuff that dries out and shatters. And
they call those the Marconi knobs, I think.
Yeah, but it didn't look right. But I saw. Because obviously Rupert died just over a week ago, or is it even a week ago at this point? And there was some article of the 60 that I perused since then, where he was just talking about he could not believe that people were still revering those EQs. Because like, man, they're good, but I didn't really know, and I've learned so much since then, and my new stuff is so much better, but no one's interested. We were. They are interested, and they still make great gear, and people are buying it. But
those are just magic. A lot of those old Gibsons are hard to keep in tune and have all riddled with issues. But there's magic in some of those older guitars too. So
it's all the hand wound transformers and the discrete frequency selectors. So it's all hand picked resistors to do that, and yeah.
So tell us a little bit. I'm actually very curious. Let me just go off topic. What's underneath the magic sheet in the rack there? Is that some special?
It's not very exciting. So I got these cases made for my modular synth very recently. There used to be a sofa back there, and you can see there's a beam behind me. If you're a cat and you hop up on that beam, you can then get up into the attic, and they like to hang out up there. So when the modular went there, they were crawling up and down the modular, and like that is not going to work. So I put a ladder next to it with a quilt on it, and now they go up and down the quilt.
Oh, I got it. I thought it was some special, like in the works.
No
technology.
I should really make something up, but no, it's a metal ladder with a quilt on it.
So you going from the Neve workflow or the old school workflow into the new school workflow was like, is it about consistency? Is it about better sounds or convenience for you? Does it suit your workflow better? What was your deciding factor? Because you're a guy that could have kept that Neve.
It's all of the above. I mean, the main thing that kicked my ass to actually go ahead and do it was the flexibility, because people were not paying for the studio. No one was paying a daily rate for anything. So if it took me 4 days to get them to sign off on a mix, I'm just losing money, and I can't work on anything else, because you can't take it off the desk and put it back up and expect it to sound the same. It won't. It'll sound different, and people don't like different now. So there was that. But I mean, I've always been really into computers. I mean, I was a very early Synclavier guy, and then Pro Tools. I've been beta testing since NuBus Pro Tools. And I used to wait for the new beta to show up on a floppy, So the technology was always fine with me. And I absolutely love it now. It was a bit of a transition, but once I figured it out, it's been great. And I absolutely would not mix on a console anymore. No way.
Oh, that's amazing.
Now, is there a certain amount of your life that's like, okay, I got to get this done in the analog world, then solidified in the digital world? Do you have a process?
Nope. And I think that these questions always get framed with the sort of tacit understanding that the analog is better than the digital, and I just say bullshit. Can we say that on this show?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't believe it. Obviously, while it's analog, while it is a sound wave, and before you digitize it, it's analog. So if you've got analog tools that have things about them that you like, then you should absolutely use them. And I would gladly use a Neve and Fairchilds and all sorts of stuff while I'm tracking before it gets into the computer. But there's no, at this point, to say like, oh, I could get a sound on that vocal with some analog gear that you'll never get in the digital world might be true, but is it going to be better? No, it's just going to be different. Mm-hmm. And I think that the problem has been that for years, digital was not great, but now it is great. A to Ds and D to As are great now, which sort of takes away a little bit of the argument for keeping it digital, because the idea of going out through 32 D to As and then slamming a mix back into an A to D, like, well, why would you do that if you didn't have to? That's not ideal. But A to Ds and D to As are really good now. But the processing is great. And I think that people were just so used to everything you get for free with analog. There's always harmonic distortion. There's always high pass and low pass if you have a transformer. There's phase shift. There's all kinds of stuff, which is what we're used to hearing. And you think like, oh, I just patched in my LA2A and it just sounds better. Like, no, it has all of those things. You can now dial in all those things in the digital world if that's what you want. And the best part about it is you now actually have control over it. So if you don't want it, you don't need it. When I moved from the console into Pro Tools and finally got my stereo bus off the gear, it was like the best day ever. My mixes no longer lean to the right. I never had to compromise between I'm not getting the character I want out of it, but now I'm distorting it. The headroom issues disappear completely with floating point and master faders. You can, anything you want to do, you can do at any time, but you've got to know what you're doing, because the digital doesn't do it for you in the same way that the analog gear does.
Oh, that's a great point. There's certain things where people wouldn't know why they did what they did, but they just come up and done it so long, and it delivered a sound, like hitting the tube bus on an SSL a certain way, or doing a certain gag with a microphone and compressor. But it was
absolutely,
but it works every time. But they wouldn't know why.
It's all quantifiable and knowable. That's the thing. There isn't magic. There isn't a bunch of unicorn poop inside of a Fairchild. It's just a gigantic number of tubes and transformers and wire. And that stuff sounds like something whether you're compressing or not.
That's a great point.
If you understand that, you can get those sorts of characters, but
use it for that.
Have amazing control over it.
Yeah. So when you're, let's say, and I know you adapt to whatever record, you got triage where it's like you make a day successful, however you need to make it successful. But let's say you're recording a record that you're kind of in charge of the technology and it can go the way you want it to go. So if you're going in to record a record with a lot of people on the floor, what's that look like? Would you go in the night before and get tones? Do you use tape? Do you go right to an A to D converter, or using a big, large format console? What would you say would be the easiest solution?
Well, when Mono Valley was open, if I had a gig to record, I would go there. So a really great acoustic space is the first thing. Then microphones. Then I had my Neve, so I would use that, but good mic pre's. Generally, not a lot of processing, just because I don't record with a lot of processing. I'm either like destroying something or I'm recording the microphone. And maybe there's some EQ. But I think for most of us, the more we record, the less we do on the way in. You just get better at like picking the right microphone and also not presupposing what something's supposed to be, because the source is obviously such a huge part of the sound.
And knowing what you could do with it later.
And that if it's not right, you've probably got them in the wrong part of the room, or it's the wrong mic. Like, that's usually what's wrong with a sound when you're recording. It isn't because you haven't EQ'd it yet. So I think that the recording chain for me has gotten simple, but obviously if I can do everything with great mics through a Neve and all that, but then it's straight into Pro Tools. And then the process for me is to do almost no processing until it's time to mix. I don't like getting very complicated while tracking. The sounds need to work. old school, like a monitor section on an 8038, where it's just a passive monitor section. There are no sends, there's no EQ, there's no nothing. So as much as possible, I like to record it so it works. And obviously some records you can't do that, but if you can, and then when it's time to mix, then, you know, whatever, use absolutely anything and everything to do it. But I like the project to stay very, very simple monitoring wise until it's mixing time. Because also that's the best way for my brain to switch modes. Solve a problem with an overdub, then solve a problem sonically. Those are two totally different ways to think.
Oh, that's
I can't think both ways at the same time. Some people can, but I can't.
Well, it's good to parse it too, because a lot of people will say, "We'll fix it in the mix." Whenever it's like, "Hey, just move the microphone or choose a different mic."
Yeah, I never, ever, ever want to leave something where it's like, yeah, I know this sucks, but wait till we mix it. Like, that's like a mixer saying, oh, well, wait till it's mastered. Like, you can't, right. It needs to work, but you also can know in the back of your head that, okay, this works now, but it's going to really work later. Like, right. The thing that's popping now will explode.
Nothing gives you that confidence other than doing it for 30 years. It's like knowing whenever there's a certain amount of knowing how projects come together, say, okay, this is actually only going to get better, you know, and not taking a lazy way out.
I think it's also the idea, and this again goes to the recording thing. Like if it's not right, it's because the source is weird or the mic choice is wrong. And it's usually nothing past that. It's knowing, like at the beginning, you have this idea of what you want everything to be. And now I have no idea what I want anything to be. And I really don't care. I love to be surprised by things and watch stuff come together. But the experience is what lets me know very early on, like, wow, that's not going to work.
Right.
That is maturity. Like there's something that's stepping on what we're trying to do. So that's the thing I'll fix, but let everything else just be whatever it is and know that it's going to work, because of course it will.
Would you say that you're more of like, hey, I want to document this accurately, or I want to take it and muscle it into this complete, you know, manufactured thing? Do you do both? You know, like some guys will take a record and it's like really changes.
I mean, sometimes I very much like to get the energy of the live players and not document, like Steve Albini is purely just to document the band guy. I'm not to that extreme at all. I love experimenting with things, and I'll, you know, crush the hell out of one drum mic every time I'm recording and things like that. But there are creative times during tracking that are like during mixing where, like I was tracking something, it was during a seminar. So it was a very low pressure recording gig. You know, it's like you got 7 people behind you. They're looking to see what you're doing. And as we're tracking, like, man, these drums are cool. The drummer's really great, but this just isn't as much fun as it should be. And we're using a 67 as kind of a mono kit mic. And I just reached over and turned the mic pre up all the way. And it just turned into a fuzz bomb. And it was the best thing ever and totally transformed the way the band played and transformed the track. And so I'm not averse to doing something like that at all. But it's got to be I want it to be something the band plays to and reacts to. And it becomes part of the actual process, not I'm going to go away now and totally change what we recorded and check this out. Like it wants to be part of the organic thing.
That's a great point. It's like playing through an amplifier. You'll play differently.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to track a band just with DIs and say, we'll sort that out.
Right. You know? Yeah. Inspired headphone mixes lead to inspired performances.
Absolutely. I have said this many times that the most important part of any studio is the cue system.
Yeah. Very cool. And what about on the Adele record? What was your participation on that? I know that you won a Grammy for that.
That was mixing.
So you weren't on any of the tracking of that? Mixed the record?
No. The songs that I mixed are the ones that Rick Rubin produced and Greg Fiddleman tracked that.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about that experience. Was that something like, how did you feel about that record as it was going down? It ended up being such a, when you heard the record, it was, regardless of his accolades, you couldn't help but have an emotional response to that record, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously she's a ridiculous talent, and someone just pointed out it's the 10th anniversary of that record, like, oh my goodness, right now, and it is still it's the biggest selling record of this decade, which is scary, and wish I had a royalty on that, but you know that's another story for another day. She's super talented. The band was amazing. I mean, the band of the stuff that I was recording, the core rhythm section was Chris Dave, Pino Palladino, Smokey Hormel, just a great band. But to be 100% honest, it's not in my wheelhouse genre-wise, and as amazing as her vocals are in the choruses when she really gets going, it's hard to work on, because if you're listening loud, it's just coming to get you. Mm-hmm. You know, her voice is so big that it was actually tiring sometimes to work on it. And I absolutely loved there's a cover of a Cure song, Love Song, on that record. And it's a really low-key bossa nova thing. I think that was like Smokey's idea to do that song in that way. And she absolutely nailed it. But you really hear what control she has too, because it isn't, the belting is the obvious amazing thing that she does, but her quiet vocals are insane. And I loved working on that track. I love working on any song where people play quietly. It never happens, but it's great. Sonically, it just opens up the universe.
What was that experience like working with Rick Rubin? I just huge. I listened to your podcast with Rich Costi, so I heard you guys talk about it a bit. But that was, just for those that haven't heard, he's obviously one of the all-time greats. And
yeah, I mean, I worked with him on and off for 12 years or something like that. So it was all kinds of things. Every gig was different. But I mean, obviously, the opportunities you get are amazing. The autonomy you get while you're working is pretty extensive. You're doing a lot of stuff, which is great. Yeah, I mean, what an opportunity.
You learned from him. I remember Rich in the interview with Rich. He was working on something. I think it might have been Audio Slave. I think he was talking about, where Rick just walked down to the studio. It wasn't hitting him right for whatever reason, and he just started over. And just, I think he said, bring just the acoustic up in the intro. I don't know if you recall this conversation. But
yeah, just one track at a time. Find the song.
But what would you say overall you learned from him? I'm just curious to know what you took from this.
I mean, so the problem is you don't always have the luxury of the time or the money to do this. But what you get from Rick is it's not done till it's great. Period. Oh, wow. That's it.
Yeah.
If it isn't great, it's not done. And if it refuses to become great, then you scrap it and do it again or do something else. Or there's no like, we've got 12 days and we have to do this. Or it's not that. So while you can't necessarily afford to work that way all the time, it's that idea. And certainly with my mixing, and it's why not being on the clock for mixing, I can take as long as I feel I need on a mix. If it's not exactly hitting me the way I want it to hit me, then it's not done. And it's very easy to say, well, I put in a ton of time and it's close, and let's just see what the artist thinks. Maybe the stuff that's bugging me isn't a big deal. Like, no, if it's bugging you, then it's bugging you and you have to fix it. So that was definitely reinforced from Rick the entire time I was there.
That sounds so simple. And I don't know that I would have got that earlier. It's not done till it's great, but it's part of that brave, like having the confidence to look forward to not knowing what you're about to hear through the monitors. You were talking about this earlier. So it's like, that would scare me to death as a young engineer. But as I get older, as a songwriter and as a producer and engineer, I'm excited for it not to be normal. I've got the confidence because I've got the years, and it's not done till it's great. If you pair it with that, well, then you're really on to something that is stellar. And Rick and you both have more than your share of great things because of it.
Well, it's when I'm teaching, I talk to schools quite a bit, and the phrase is that the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers. And that's exactly the same thing that I just said, but in a totally different way. But the way to bring it home to people who are like, oh, but I've done this, I've EQ'd this, I've checked all my high pass filters, like I've done all the things that need to happen, is if you're really lucky and other people hear your mix, like not just you and the band and your mom, someone is going to hit play and you're not in the room to explain things to them and tell them that, oh, well, this was tracked in a basement, or nobody gives a shit. Right. They hit play and they either think it's awesome or they don't. And that's it.
And the guy with the Neve or the SSL has no advantage over you on your Focusrite Scarlett if you can pull it off.
Absolutely. I mean, I mix stuff on a Mackie Analog 8 bus. Serban's been mixing in the box since it was the black 888s and 16-bit, and his stuff sounds way better than anything I've done. Like, there's no Yeah, if you think that a piece of gear or a piece of software is what's holding you back, then you're just making an excuse.
This is some real truth here. It's real easy to be continually searching for plugins or pieces of gear on Reverb and not spending the time in the studio woodshedding.
Yeah, but that said, can I do a little shout out for my favorite plugins I've ever seen in my life that I only found 2 days ago? They're called, I think it's Freak Show Industries, but it's Freak Show. He does 3 plugins. The interfaces are insane. The reviews and unboxing videos on the website are absolutely terrifying. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Will you tell us what they are? Are they compressors, EQs, or are they?
Who the fuck knows what they are? There's one of them that's like, I suppose it's sort of kind of a granular reverse delay, maybe, kind of. But I can't even begin to describe it. There are 3 of them, and they all absolutely destroy things in a really good way. And I actually automated one on the mix bus of something I'm working on today, and it was perfect.
Wow.
For what I was trying to
do.
Otherworldly stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So Freak Show should get it. I'll search that afterwards. We these podcasts, I have the benefit of between when we shoot them and we air them, I can go on the web. Like, who was it that was just telling?
John Fields with the
John Fields was telling us about like the best mic pre in the world. And I was like, well, I better go and see if it's on Reverb and if I could grab one at a good price before it gets, out of the episode.
Well, in the Freak Show stuff, they have prices, but you're allowed to steal them. You can pay whatever you want or get them for free. Wow. And they're like, whatever. People who are going to pay are going to pay.
Right.
So
it's an interesting model. The world is different,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And so you were in LA for all this time, I guess that's when you were working mostly with Rick Rubin. Have you watched that Shangri-La documentary that is like
I haven't actually. I saw like the first half hour of the first episode. For some reason, I haven't watched it. I'm interested to, because I spent a lot of time at that studio. But yeah, I have not seen it.
I watched it, and dude, ever since I was going to the Grammys one year and I was looking for like, what should I wear? And I searched, what should you wear to the Grammys or whatever. And up comes Rick Rubin, and he's got flip flops on, and what I think were like gym shorts from the 80s, and like a t-shirt that was so wrinkly that that it had to have been like shoved under a bed for a week, kind of,
but that's
like
what he was wearing every day at that point. So
but I just thought it was the most baller move.
And Grammy Day is just another day of the week,
Yeah. Well, watching that, Shangri-La is the studio, and it's where the Last Waltz was. If you watch that documentary, the Scorsese film about the band's Last Waltz record. And he's working out of there. It looks like they got a beautiful Neve in one room, and I can't remember something else great in another room.
An API in the main room. Yeah. Okay. And then there's I think it's both APIs actually.
There was a Neve. I could have swore there was an old 80s.
There are a lot of Neve modules laying around, but last time when I was working there was an API in the main tracking room, and then there was sort of a stand-up API in the Airstream.
There was something like in this room that looked like a little open barn, white sort of building that.
I think that was built since because he had an 8068.
I think there's an 8068
at a house, so he probably moved that finally.
But watching that. It was kind of inspirational, not because it's like I want to be Rick Rubin, but I want to think differently, right? Like I want to be challenged to see the world a little bit, be malleable enough to know what it is, like the way I see my world of audio, what I believe in as truth in audio. But I also want to watch guys like Rick Rubin and talk to guys like you, where it's like, I can imagine if a UFO screams across the sky, I can start to think other things, right? You can start to be influenced by it. And that guy was a true inspiration. When I watched that, it was just like, I really need to open myself up. As much as we deduce, all this 30 years of experience, we're getting better and better, but we're also getting more narrow in what we do with our outcomes. At least for me, my outcomes more consistent, which maybe make sense to a record company. But as an artist, I want to do what Rick is doing, which is this. He's doing spoken word poetry. He's doing guys that are, got just a synthesizer making weird noises and wire recordings. And, the whole thing was just, for me, it was a good thing for me to watch, just to say, hey, I need to make sure that I'm always open to something that I'm insecure about, or something that I've never heard before, or attempt something and not know how it's going to come out.
I think it's admitting to yourself that you like whatever it is that you like. And at the same time, you dislike whatever you dislike. And it's when you're younger, especially, it's really easy to try and define that with genres. Like, oh, I don't like this kind of music, or I like this kind of music. And that's not it. I like dark and difficult music in any genre on the planet. I don't like super happy major music in any genre on the planet. Like, it doesn't matter the setting, the instrumentation, whether it has lyrics, like none of that matters. It's the emotional thing that you react to. And also get out of just music. Look at sculpture and read books and look at art and read about the artists and then read about people like John Cage, which is easy to dismiss as gimmicky or whatever, but the philosophy behind why he was doing what he was doing will absolutely inform the way you work on a pop record.
Tell me a little bit more about John Cage. Who is John Cage?
John Cage, well, he's a 20th century composer. He's most famous for the 4 minutes 33 silent piece, which he's not the only person to have written a silent piece of music, but the idea is there is no music. You sit in front of a piano. It was originally written for piano, but you sit with the lid closed for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It's in 3 movements. So it's like, what a total gimmick. It's total crap. What he was really, really into was the I Ching, which is chance. So he would be flipping coins, like while he's to make any decision, he'd be flipping coins and looking stuff up and decide like, okay, this is how things would go. But the idea of 4 minutes 33 was first the concept that without silence, there is no music. Mm-hmm. You have to have space between the notes as well as the notes. If you just slam all the notes together in any piece of music, it's shit. Nobody wants to hear it. Rhythm comes from space between notes and all of that. So the space is really interesting as a concept. Then from there, he went and got himself into an anechoic chamber. Like somebody had one in New York and he got to go in. And I'm vaguely remembering this from stuff I've read, so I'm sure I'm going to get facts wrong, but it's close enough. And when he got into the anechoic chamber, anyone who's been in a quiet room realizes that it's never silent. Below a certain level, you start to hear your ears are going nuts. You hear the blood rushing through the veins in your ears. You hear your body and all of that. And so the idea of the 4 minutes 33 was to force the listeners to experience themselves for 4 minutes and 33 seconds because they weren't going to be distracted by something else. They would have to sit for that long and experience. And usually, first minute or so, you're just thinking, what an asshole. What the hell's going on here? But if you stick with it, it's almost like a meditation. And it is just kind of mind-boggling what happens in 4.5 minutes. So, and he had lots and lots of pieces like that.
And this can be applied to your mixes. It's like, have you ever gotten down so far in the queues of your plugins that you've decided to turn them all off and realized that you were much better up at plugin 2 or plugin 0?
Well, just the fact that your chorus can't sound big if your verse is too big.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about contrast and the difference between things. There's nothing empirically anything about anything. It's only in relation to something else. So I did for years. I worked with Wendy and Lisa when they were just starting out scoring TV and film and things. And we had a director who, I mean, this is no dig on the director, obviously had no experience of music as a musician. And he just said, look, man, what's the saddest note you can play? And it's almost like it sounds like a Spinal Tap joke line. But he meant it. Like, I want to be really sad here, so just play the sad note. Instead of realizing that it's only the ecosystem that note is living in that makes it sad.
Absolutely.
And obviously instrument choice, everything about it is what makes it sad. But it's like, you know, it's not Lick My Love Pump in D minor, the saddest of all keys, you know, or whatever it is.
But this is a great point. And it also brings us back to a conversation about, like, when you're mixing a record, you need to be able to zoom in to a single frequency in your kick drum, but you need to be able to zoom out and listen to it as though you're a 12-year-old kid. or a grandmother. That's the true art of spending 8-10 hours in a room or multiple days in a room trying to get something great that you've now ruined your perspective on. Like how, the true test of a great engineer is being able to zoom out and say, hey, I'm listening like this, I'm listening like this, I'm listening for the differences, all the things of how you end up with a great mix. When you say the verse is too big, it ruins the chorus, right?
Yeah.
So how do you fix something like that? It's like you bring up the chorus or bring down the verse.
Yeah.
It's all sleight of hand.
I think like the kick drum example, the only reason to be looking at a particular frequency on a kick drum is because while you're listening to the entire mix, the kick drum's not happening. There's something wrong with it. I don't know what it is.
Right.
All right. Oh, wow. It's like there's a ton of floor tom bleed in it. Let me try and suck some of that out and see if that does it. But like, there's no point in going after a particular frequency on a kick drum just because you should. Like, you never should.
Or you can, right?
Now, there are some records, like if you're mixing a Metallica record, the kick drum needs to be a certain thing. It's got to be that. If you're mixing a Jellyfish record, the kick drum needs to be a totally different thing. So there are aesthetics you're working within, but yeah, the soloing up a kick drum and checking out a certain frequency for no reason is just wasting time.
Do you find yourself mixing more holistically the older you get? And then when you have to going into like engineer mode?
I'm getting better at it. Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, it's identifying what to do next is the holistic part. Doing the thing is always going to be technical, right? You're mixing. So even if it's just balance, even if it's just level, you're always doing something technical to fix the thing that's bothering you. But it's the ability to try and stay listening as a listener to decide what is actually wrong and what needs to be changed, not to solo up the kick drum and say, oh boy, I better do something about something.
Yeah. Did you find did you naturally start your career that way, or is it something you sort of grew that muscle later?
No, you learn to listen. That's, right. I mean, that's what it is. You have to learn to listen, and it's a really difficult thing to do. It's a very underserved sense compared to vision. There's a lot less brain sort of applied to it originally. So it takes a while to do that. And then once you can start hearing it, then you've got to start building up the catalog of, okay, I'm hearing this thing and I know exactly how I'm going to attack it, as opposed to there's something wrong with the kick drum. What do I do? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a lot of years of being bad at it to get okay at it.
Well, you're certainly very good at it. We appreciate you hanging out with us and taking the time out of your day.
Fun.
Thank you so much. Do you have any websites or any points of contact you'd like out there?
No, I took myself off Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I'm useless. I don't have a website. Well, no, I mean, I'd say I'd love people to go check out Low Roar, which is the band I mentioned earlier that's on my label. So you should check out Low Roar. They're around lowroarmusic.com, I think. I'd also say for engineers who want to be, well, not even engineers, anyone who uses Pro Tools who wants to be productive, you should go check out SoundFlow, which is a scripting platform for automating Pro Tools. I've written some apps in it, but you don't have to be a total geek to use it. And it saves me hours every day. And to make the point of why that matters is the more you're not being technical, the more you're being creative. So
great point.
Automate the technical stuff.
And Freak Show.
And Freak Show.
I'll make sure that I put these down in the description as close as I can get to destinations on the internet for all this stuff.
Excellent.
I'll do that. But thank you, dude. Very kind of you to spend the time. I know you're in the middle of your day over there, where we're in the morning over here. So appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to talk to us.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you. That's it this week from the West Barn. We'll see you next time. Signing off.